Hello, hello, good afternoon. So how do we follow Joe Jordan? It is really about people. It is really about more than math and annuities and innovation. So I know these people, they're friends. You can look them up. But Tamiko, Bobby, Jason, thank you so much for being here today. And Jason, can you please help us set the stage that this really is about the people. It's about people who are making transition into a very important stage of their life.
Well, I think it's, first of all, good afternoon and thank you for being here. Just as a quick intro, I'm Jason Fichtner, the Chief Economist at the Bipartisan Policy Center. It's one of the think tanks in Washington, D.C. And little fun fact, we are the only organization registered in the District of Columbia with the word bipartisan in our title. And as an economist, that's either a supply problem or a demand problem, but it does tell you there's a problem. That's basically
Is that true?
It is true.
That is crazy.
Yeah, it's a fun fact. So we want to set the stage for today as like sort of why this is important. And to give you, I'll take sort of 5 minutes. We are now in 2024 entering what I call the peak 65 zone. So 4.1 million Americans are turning 65 every year between now and 2027. That's 11,200 a day. We're also having this giant transition away from defined benefit plans where people worked and got a paycheck. Then they retired, they also got a paycheck when they retired. People are used to having that budget constraint. The generation coming up behind us now, the millennials, they're basically called the 401k generation. They don't know what a pension is. We have this transition now with people turning 65, which is traditionally the anchor year which we look about retirement. Whether 65 is relevant anymore, some people say we should retire the word retirement. That 65 no longer has any relevance because Social Security's full retirement age is now 67. But that's still that cultural anchor, and that's sort of what makes this a window of opportunity for us to talk about what sort of changes need to happen, because we're also 10 years away from the OASDI trust funds. That's the Old Age Survivors Insurance and Disability, also known as Social Security. The trust funds being depleted in 2034 on a combined basis. If Congress does nothing, the default option is a 25% reduction in benefits. There's no borrowing authority for Social Security. There's no automatic tax increase. The default is Social Security can only pay out in benefits what it collects in revenues. So we are at this inflection point now where we need to think about how we basically bring back the three-legged stool. If you remember, the three-legged stool is basically three parts of your income in retirement. You've had Social Security, which is only designed to replace about 40% for the average American. You had a defined benefit from your employer, and you had your personal savings. Well, now Social Security, that leg's a little wobbly financially, but it's still the bedrock for most people's financial security. The defined benefit plan is gone. It is now a defined contribution plan, but how do we help people turn that DC plan into some sort of income when they retire? And you still need personal savings on top of that. So now we've shifted a lot of the risk onto the individual to help fund their retirement. And that's a sea change for a lot of us when we start thinking about this both from the employer space, also from the plan sponsor space, and from the financial advisor space. Because people basically have to accumulate, they get to retirement, and then we say, go forth, have fun. They don't, how long are you gonna live? How long is this money gonna last? Can I do a 4% drawdown rule? What if I decide to do a 4% drawdown rule the next day the market has a financial collapse like 2008 or like COVID? Your 401k is now a 201k. Your 4% drawdown now is a 2% drawdown. You can't afford to live on that. How do we start taking the best features of what were the defined benefit plan, which again, were basically a paycheck for life, and put that into the component of a DC plan, while still keeping what the DC plan does best, which is allow personal savings and asset accumulation and growth even in retirement. That's kind of where we are today. And this is a big sea change. And it's not just for those who are turning 65 today, because we have two peaks. Think about mountains. Peak 65 is one. Again, 4.1 million Americans turning 65 every year between now and 2027, 11,200 a day. We also now, this year in 2024, are at our peak millennial moment, where basically the millennials who were born somewhere around 1991 are now about 31, 32 years old. They are the largest generation. Whatever issues we are seeing today with people who are pre-retirees or 65 and thinking to retire is only going to be magnified for the generation that's basically 30 years behind us. We need to put things in place not just for today's retirees, but thinking about that generation that's coming up behind, because they're going to be the ones who are going to benefit from a lot of the policy changes we put in place and in more need for it. Because again, some people today do have a partial pension. The ones that are coming up 30 years behind us don't. It's a 401k generation. How do we help them get protected income through annuities or something else in retirement so they have that paycheck? When we talk to people, the research I've done, if I ask people, would you like to get a paycheck in retirement? They go, yes. Would you like to make sure that you do not outlive, that you basically, your savings will last a lifetime? They say yes. You say, do you want an annuity? They say no. When I ask them, do you like Social Security? Yeah, if it's there for me. I'm like, do you realize that Social Security is an annuity? You go, what? Like, Social Security is an annuity. It is an inflation-protected annuity. It's also an insurance program. Technically, it is an old age insurance program. It was never meant to be a retirement program for everybody. Again, it was designed to be 1/3 potentially of your income in retirement. So now we need to rethink this entire conversation, think holistically about retirement and how we take Social Security, which is still a bedrock, make sure it's financially stable, but now talk about that DC component and how we take that DC component and help people in some way, shape, or form get some protected income out of that DC plan, and then still talk about personal savings on top of that. So there's a lot of things we need to think about when we start thinking about retirement and holistically how we change the nature of the conversation now so that income is the outcome in retirement.
Thank you, Jason. And what we are tasked today is to talk about innovation. So I think the perfect setup is to basically see where we were without dating ourselves, where were we 10 years ago? What do we kind of spoke about as an innovation then? And what do we have to do over the next 10 years so that some other people sit here and talk about the same things that we have been advocating today? So maybe, Bobby, if you want to start with what happened over the last 10 years, because I haven't seen much innovation in the field, even though people were trying.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of ways when we talk about innovation, we go straight to product, because that's the thing we can control, right? So when you think about distribution, I can't make a financial advisor talk about annuities if they don't like annuities. And a lot of financial advisors don't. I mean, I had this experience, gosh, I don't know, 3 or 4 years ago. I was out and about and I ran into a big RIA in Charlotte where I live, and he knew I was in the life insurance and annuity business. I worked at MetLife at the time, and he said, oh my gosh, you know, I had this client, had this crazy VA with these 3% charges, such a bad product. I got him out of it, don't worry. And I was like, well, did you stop to ask what the 3% charges were paying for? Like in a lifetime income benefit? And the RA hadn't even thought about it, right? I'd just seen this annuity and transferred it out. And that's a bias, right? It's a bias we deal with distribution and advisors all the time, where a lot of people just don't want to talk about it. So some of the innovation in our industry is, all right, how do we get technology that lets people, you know, integrate annuities into financial plans? I know it's something you guys are working on. How do we get advisors to think about annuities when they otherwise wouldn't? And then the big question is, yeah, what about innovation in terms of product? And, you know, in the last 15 years or so, I think the big story has really been around indexed products. We've seen VAs sort of taper off. We've seen FIAs increase. We've seen RILA come on the scenes. And there's no question that an FIA is an innovative product. When FIA came out, it changed the whole conversation around annuities. We had talked about fixed deferred annuities. That's easy, you know, get a rate, certain period of time, whatever. And now all of a sudden we have this product that can tell a different story, which is, you know, downside protection, upside potential based on index performance. Every client loves that concept. Downside protection, upside potential, zero is your hero. That sticks, that works. I think the challenge has been, okay, well, how have we innovated past that? And the vast majority of the innovation we've seen in the last 15 years or so has really been not so much on the product itself, but on the crediting strategies. And we've seen this incredible proliferation of what I'll call an engineered index, so non-S&P 500 strategies. All these indexes out in the marketplace with brand names attached to them. You're going to correct me on the number. I count about 170 of them in market or so.
So the numbers there are that in 2015, there were half dozen indices in the FIAs. And today we have around 120 live and over 200 those that were in the FIAs in the last, 10.
Yeah, it's crazy. It's crazy. So we see this proliferation. And I think one of the questions we've got to grapple with as an industry is that actually innovation? Is that actually helping people achieve their goals in a way that we couldn't do with a traditional FIA? And I'd say the jury's still out. A lot of those indexes have not performed very well. A few have done very well, but a lot of them have not done nearly what everybody thought. And so when you think about, okay, well, why are these so popular? You know, one of the reasons why is because we're inevitably in an advisor-driven industry. And if you think about it, downside protection, upside potential, well, that story really works if you can tell somebody that they're going to have downside protection, and as is the top FIA in the marketplace today for illustrations, illustrating a 32.97% return in an FIA contract. You know, clients feel their salivation start to go, right? Their mouth starts watering, thinking, wow, no risk, 33% returns. How many of you guys want that deal? Of course, but is it real? Does it actually work that way? Is that actually innovation? And again, I think that's a bit of an open question. Similar deal on the RILA side. RILA is a great product. It's basically an FIA with downside risk. It's not that crazy if you think about it that way. I worked at MetLife. We built one of the first ones in Marketplace. It's a great equity alternative. You can offer sort of equity-like returns with some level of downside protection, although not complete downside protection. Is there a story there? Absolutely. Can it be missold and misused? Yes, absolutely. For example, do clients really understand that they're on the hook for all the risk below the 10% buffer? I'm not sure. We haven't seen a lot of years where every client's gotten that trigger yet. How will that play out? So I think maybe from my vantage point, to me, it's still an open question. Did we innovate in the last 15 years or not? And what do we need to do going forward to make these products more relevant to more people? Is it more crediting strategies? Is it more engineered indexes? Probably not. We probably have to go a lot farther beyond that and do really what FIA did in the beginning, which is create new product categories. And I think that's the challenge before us as an industry, to make our products more appealing to more people in more ways. I'll close with this last comment. The utilization of annuities is just incredibly low. If you go look at even last year, everybody's applauding the MYGA boom. And look, we had a great year in MYGA last year. FIA had a great year. But if you look at money going into bank CDs, money market mutual funds, short-term bond funds, we are a teeny tiny little drip in the bucket, especially once you take out all the 1035 exchange business, and there's a lot of that going on. The amount of new money entering our ecosystem relative to other asset classes is so small. And so when I think about innovation, I think, how do you solve that problem, right? We have great products. They're incredible in a financial plan. But how do we get more people to realize that? And like I said, I don't think a crediting strategy is going to do it. But unfortunately, that's been the story for the last 10 or 15 years.
So I put a pin on one of your comments, and it was really about presenting this to the end client, educating the advisors, educating the end clients. And do you think there is the understanding of all this complexity on a distribution side? And do you think that this complexity is warranted, given that we see another side of the equation, which is in-plan assets that are striving for ultimate simplicity, basically trying to democratize the huge amount of annuity inside of these plans, add them as kind of yet another default solution. And the story is about simplicity, whereas you and I can now go back and forth about complexity and, oh yes, my firm can help you discern like what are the good indices from bad indices. We can help you choose the right annuities. There are good players, there are bad players, but overall as an industry, is this complexity warranted?
Yeah, so I think it's a little tricky because the products are still pretty simple, right? We're still selling FIA that's downside protection, upside potential. So in some ways, we've stuck to our knitting in terms of core simplicity of the product. Now, the number one selling FIA in the industry is a very complex product. It's an income benefit on a core FIA chassis with a multiplier factor on it. It's a little bit complicated. But most FIAs, especially accumulation FIAs, are still the same simple chassis. The issue is the crediting strategies are becoming increasingly complicated. And actually, first thing you said to me today was, can you believe XYZ crediting strategy that dropped last week?
True story.
True story. Yeah, so I guess my question, I have my own opinion, but for you guys, since you guys are out on the field, how many of you guys feel like your clients fully understand how every index works if they allocate to it? Right? If any of you raises your hand, I'd be surprised. And I think that's really the issue. And it doesn't matter when all the indexes are doing well. And it doesn't matter really when equities are doing well. When it matters is when you get a year like 2023, where you have some indexes that are negative and a year when the S&P is positive. How do you have that conversation with the client? That's when complexity bites. And I think the challenge is we are right now sort of figuring out whether or not this complexity is okay, because we're actually getting clients who are getting 0% credits in years where they thought they were going to have positive credits, and they're asking why, and the advisor does not have an answer. And by the way, neither does the insurance company, and a lot of times neither does the bank, because these things change their allocation every day. And so unless you have the daily allocations, answering that question is pretty hard. Or you can just buy the index standard. That's a lob ball for you. But I mean, but seriously, like we need a third-party resource, because that part of the product is complicated, and I just think that's where we as an industry have to get real about sticking to our knitting. Are we selling simple products, or are we going to delve into this complexity, especially for advisors who don't have their securities registration?
Yeah, so I have to take a plug. So the idea is that we need to simplify what's already complicated. And again, we have to simplify products, we have to simplify what indices are all about. And to Bobby's point, I think it's important for clients and advisors to know what are these indices made of. So what we've seen in the last couple of years is going back to basics in terms of index design. We've seen in the past, in the low rate environment, multi-asset indices, low volatility targets. What we've seen in the last couple of years being launched is indices that are based on common benchmarks. You're seeing NASDAQ, you're seeing S&P, but there is the volatility overlay on it that will basically provide some cushioning so that there is some stability to the annuity parameters for the crediting strategies that are sometimes very complicated. But the idea is that I think where the product developers and carriers are going with is they're looking to provide a good in-force experience, which is constant, consistent credits, annuity parameters that are not moving a lot from what they were when the policies were purchased, and providing certain level of education, also diversification through their policies so that you get continuous credits for your clients, especially when the review time hits.
One comment on that.
Yep.
The other big trend we've seen is people just saying, well, the S&P cap is 10%. Why not just do that? And I think that's kind of been an interesting dynamic because a lot of this stuff was created in a low rate environment. And again, I would just kind of say, from an innovation standpoint, that's what was innovative. It gave the potential for more upside in a low rate environment. We're not in a low rate environment anymore. And so I think one of the questions is, to your point, even these new modern indexes, do they make the case versus traditional S&P? And is the complexity worth the risk, given that you have a pretty simple option? To me, it's an open question. It's like some people would argue that's innovation, some people maybe not. But I think it's a question we as an industry have to grapple with because you can't deny that the growth in FIA and the growth in RILA is to some degree related to these more complex stories. Is that good? Does that expand our appeal? Is that how we grow the market? I'm not sure that's the answer.
I don't think it's either or. I think it's a combination of factors. And I think what's really important to understand is that not all indices are made the same. In a similar way that you have studies that compare mutual funds to the S&P, only a certain number of active managers outperforms. We did similar study at Index Standard. They found that roughly 15% of custom indices outperform S&P when they're put through the annuity. So not racing them on their own, putting them through the annuity structures, putting them through all the, as Bobby said, like caps, floors, participation rates, and there are good ones out there. The idea is, how do you find them? And then what do you do if the index that's kind of deemed good is not sold through your distribution channel, or it's not through the carrier that you're looking to sell? So I think more questions than answers, but I think one aspect that we all are kind of seeing is moving from this complexity into something that looks, at least to the surface, Tamiko, as a simplicity of the in-plan market. We're really trying to push as many people towards the guaranteed either accumulation or guaranteed accumulation with some form of lifetime income type solution. So can you maybe walk us through, is this really happening?
It's starting to actually happen. I mean, I think that we've been talking about the in-plan market for a long time. I actually wrote a report about it originally in 2012. And we thought that was the cusp of the explosion of in-plan annuities. No explosions yet. We definitely have some more momentum at this point, which is very exciting. But the thing is to understand is that it's not the same as the individual market. And what you're trying to accomplish is really different because you're selling these or making available annuities and annuity embedding products that are being used by a whole group of people, these plan participants. And so you're really aiming for kind of the middle of the lane. You're not specializing the design of products for specific use cases. And so in-plan and individual markets are just fundamentally very different of the problem that they're trying to solve. And I guess the other thing is, let's ask the question about how popular annuities are with individual consumers who say, they raise their hands and say, I want an annuity and I'm going to go to the trouble of purchasing one by myself without any help. So we know that folks have been trying to do this in the retail space for a while and it's completely unsuccessful, right? But that is what we're asking people to do inside of a retirement plan. Right, that people will have this annuity, whether they were defaulted into it, but then they still have to decide to use it for lifetime income, or they're actively making an election. It doesn't matter. It still always requires the participant to say, hey, I really want this thing. And we haven't armed people to do that in the retail space. But the great thing is that this is an opportunity to help so many people who want lifetime income, who don't understand annuities, who don't understand the 401k plans. 40% of 401k plan participants do not have an email address attached to their accounts. Okay, they're paying zero attention to what's going on in there. They're going to stumble into retirement, and I want them to have the option of getting this lifetime income. And I want it to be easy because those people are the ones that don't have an advisor helping them. And they're not getting the guidance. But you could still see this obvious gap in terms of delivery and helping them actually understand the decision that they're making so that they can do the right thing for themselves.
So the question is there, like one crazy statistic that I've heard a couple of days ago, and like Bobby or Jason corroborated early in our preparation, is that, was it you? I'm so sorry.
Twas.
I'm so sorry. So that 70% of people who own target date funds actually believe that there is some form of guaranteed income embedded in them, and this is basically their pension solution that they can count on, which is not true. But what I think it's getting kind of nice adoption in the market is that a lot of the innovation is going through wrapping annuity type solution in the CITs, in the target date funds. Can you maybe speak a bit more to that?
Yeah, and so this is actually one of those interesting convergences of simplicity and complexity. So we have moved into a space where the adoption of target date funds is tremendously high because they can be used as a default, right? So it's all really driven by, legislative measures, but it's great. So the idea is like approximately get people to retirement in a way that generally sort of makes sense for most folks. And now if you take that philosophy and you throw the annuity in there, that's where we get to this, this new concept. And it can be manifested either inside of a collective investment trust, CIT, which is like a mutual fund, but it can hold an annuity, but it can only live within a retirement plan, or inside basically personalized or customized target date structures that use different mechanics, right? So those are the different ways that we look at it. But the issue is how those solutions work. Forget about what kind of annuity it is, but how they actually function and how the individual who's going to be retiring is learning about it and interacting with it. Like that's really where the rubber meets the road. But the issue is with the complexity is a lot of times the solutions are so complex under the hood, but the people who are deciding to stick it in the plan have got to understand it well enough. And so this is why I say we're very early days, because even if you look at something like the CIT, say, stick an annuity inside the CIT, you can do that. But in reality, the manifestations of that and mechanics are completely different. Like if you look only at operational concerns, completely throw out what kind of annuity is, just on those operational considerations, you have distinctions among the solutions on the marketplace today. And so this is why I'm saying, yes, we're going for simplicity that's sort of, it's the shell hiding a lot of complexity. There's so much education that needs to happen. And, the concerns right now, and I see this a lot in the 401k space, is that, having the 401ks with annuities is going to affect the retail market. And I am not going to be alive at whatever point in time this actually happens, because it ain't happening anytime soon. We don't expect to see this disintermediation because they're different clients with different needs. You have somebody that has more complex situation, more sophisticated, they're going to need to go to an advisor who's going to sell them something. It's like, this really specifically fits your case, right? You need other features that aren't available. But you can understand the drive for also having very simple products that sit inside of a retirement plan to help the folks who are like, I want more than I'm getting from Social Security. And, look, my employer offers it, and I can click here, click, and I understand how this is going to affect my retirement income, and now I want to get, that is like the dream state, but it is still a dream.
So basically we agree that adding in-plan innovation will change and basically help bring us back to the three-legged stool that Jason was talking about. Bobby, do you have any comments on what can we borrow from the retail space, from the individual annuity space, and what can we, what we have learned in terms of, let's say, lifetime income provisions, complexity around there? How do we make this as simple as possible? In other words, what are the current solutions in the retail space that we can say, maybe we avoid something like this, or maybe we like these solutions because they're taking into consideration more than just guaranteed income.
Yeah, I mean, I think what's been interesting to watch is all the different variations of stuff that people are proposing putting in an in-plan. I mean, it's fixed deferred where you are supposed to annuitize, fixed deferred where you're not supposed to annuitize, fixed deferred with GLWB, SPIAs, DIAs, somebody's put an FIA in one. So it's kind of an interesting question, but I'd say on the retail side, what retail's great for is trying new stuff out. Because the plan sponsors are not going to be, and the funds are not going to take the new stuff in the way that we can do on the retail side, where we can kind of create something, throw it in the market, and see if it works. What I think works in the retail space may not be what works in the in-plan space. And I think it's going to be kind of this interesting dynamic. Like the product that if you were to pull a random person out on the Las Vegas Strip and ask them what an annuity is, well, first of all, they look at you like you have 5 heads. But if they answer to you, what they'd say, well, I think that's where I put my money in and I get income for life. Well, we call that a SPIA. And SPIA is actually a teeny, tiny part of the annuity market. And the SPIA market is almost entirely dominated by one distributor, which is Fidelity. And so the great irony is that we have this product that is a very simple annuity product that the average American would be able to describe to you exactly what it does, and no one buys it. We sell them much more complex stuff. And so, again, why do we do that in the retail space? Well, because it doesn't pay a lot of commission, and it oftentimes doesn't have inflation protection, if that's an argument. Some of the best carriers out there don't really distribute in that channel. And so it's kind of like, well, we sell them other stuff because it's more complex. We want to talk about it. Is SPIA better in an in-plan? Could be better in an in-plan. I don't know. So I think that's kind of the question is like, well, what's going to work over here that we can transfer into in-plan? But I agree with Tomiko's point, which is these are complements. These are not really competitors, and the opportunity is still on both sides. Our share of the market is so small that like whatever way we get to people is a good way to get to people. Even D2C, which I agree has lost money so far, but someone will figure that out eventually. Someone will make it work, and there's a real opportunity to be had in that space. And I think that's our greatest challenge. It's not a product question; it's an appeal to what people want. It's funny if you ever read. If you ever read old French books, I don't know why I'm bringing this up, but Count of Monte Cristo, if you read Les Mis, they don't quote net worth. So they talk about rich people, they don't quote net worth. What they actually quote is income, and they talk about annuities in these great old French books. So it was a cultural thing, and we have a cultural aversion to annuities. Even though people seem to want them, they don't want to buy them. I think that's the biggest question we have to deal with.
So let me offer up a potential solution. So one of the things about target date funds, whether you like them or not, they have democratized in some ways investing for people in a DC plan for retirement. And the whole idea of an automatic enrollment, an automatic escalation, the automatic rebalancing, the set and forget, the average American likes that, whether it's right or wrong. For people who want to do more, they can find an advisor, they can do their own thing. But think about literally this wide middle of like 80% of the population, maybe even more, that likes this target date fund sort of approach. The beauty of doing something with an in-plan and an annuity and a target date fund is you still get that 80% who do want protected income, don't understand the word annuity, what it means. They like Social Security, don't understand that's an annuity, but they want it. And if it's a target date fund, they'll get socialized to it. It'll be normalized from the time they start working. And the idea, though, is what is the default? Because everyone's like, well, the default's important. What does that mean for a payout? What if someone gets an annuity for life and they get hit by a bus? So there's all these questions that come in. So you need to think about more than one sort of default. But I have my personal favorite default, which is a bridge annuity. So fixed term. So do you know what the modal claiming age is for Social Security right now? When do most people take Social Security? 62. They call it the early eligibility age because no one likes to be late for their government benefits. What they should call it is the minimum monthly benefit age, which most people don't understand. The full retirement age is now 67. If you were scheduled to get, say, $1,000 at 67, your age 62 benefit is $700. That's a 30% reduction that lasts for the rest of your life. From that $1,000 at 67, if you waited to age 70, it's $1,240, a 24% increase in an inflation-protected annuity that lasts for the rest of your life. For those of you who want to do quick math, the $700 at 62, the $1,240 at 70 is a 77% increase. Why don't we have a default option in a in-plan 401k that says to somebody, we are going to replicate for your age 62 benefit as an annuity, short fixed term, don't worry about longevity, which will facilitate allowing you to delay claiming to 67 or 70. That's a default. If If you do that, one, for people who are married, it helps with the spousal benefit if they actually do end up dying before their spouse. It gives them a higher annuity, i.e. Social Security, that's inflation protected for the rest of their life, and it starts socializing this idea as income is the outcome in retirement. That's where I would start this sort of in-plan idea.
So that sounds interesting. Bobby, don't we have something like that in the retail market or similar to that?
I think one of our sponsors has a product like that. Yeah, Nassau has built something like that, and we also have something called Plan Gap. Similar, but it's a story-driven approach, and I think that's the other thing too, is you're finding a planning need, you identify it, and you have a product that fits that need exactly, which, again, I think that's the goal of product innovation, should be, hey, there's a need, and we have a solution, not, hey, look at this cool little thing over here, and look at what it does, maybe you want that, which I think is a lot of what we end up doing in annuities, and life insurance, by the way, it's a whole other conversation, but.
But is it also like going back to your initial comment of like net worth versus income, having to change the behavioral thing that I would much rather have a bag of cash than salary for life or a paycheck for life. Tamiko, what's your take there?
Yeah, so much of this really comes down to framing and helping people make their decisions with the right information. I feel like again, there's so much more opportunity for us to not necessarily change product, but how we deliver it, how we talk to people about it, and how they engage with it. And so, so I'm here under Income Path, and that's something that we're working on, is helping people to understand the value of the annuity in a way that hasn't been the case before, that's more relatable to individuals, because we feel like that's actually one of the missing pieces in annuity distribution. We keep on telling people that they're dumb for not understanding the value of the annuity because it's so quantitatively beneficial to their retirement. And like, you're stupid for not doing this. But haven't been doing a great job of helping them understand it in a way that's more relatable. And so whether that's Income Path or something else, I still think that is the missing need, is getting to the level of meeting people at their individual preference in order to understand whether a decision is irrevocable or not, simply the decision to take some kind of lifetime income, and then how much they want to sort of optimize that from the lump sum perspective. But we need to transition the mindset from just an annuity is a safe place to keep your money and to accumulate to, hey, there's actually a lot of benefit to this lifetime income thing, which it's named after. I mean, that's one of the problems, is that people ask what an annuity is, and when we describe it by the thing it is sold the least often for. Right? When you're looking at like a 3 to 5% of the market being in SPIAs, and we describe it by the thing that's purchased for 3 to 5% of the time, I mean, I think that math problem should be pretty obvious to our storytelling on what is an incredible product that has the opportunity to do so much good for so many people.
Well, I just think on that point too, income is the thing that you might hear on the street, and to your point, obviously is not being told that way, the right way enough. But I think the other thing too is this is a protected solution, it's a guaranteed solution. And I think when times are crazy, you want guarantees. And we don't play that up enough either. We talk about the fact that, we describe an annuity as an accumulation vehicle, which a lot of times we'll talk about tax deferral. But when the world went crazy in 2022, right, you had an annuity and the value didn't go down if it was a MIGA product, it went up. And so there's something really powerful about that. And I kind of look at, the spectrum of assets, and we have typical kind of money market all the way to equities. The reality is we have an annuity wrapper for all this stuff. We have an annuity alternative all the way across the risk return spectrum. And if you're willing to let the insurance company post a little bit of capital on your behalf effectively, you can get these protected guarantees. And I think that's worth something too. And so I think it's a both and deal, right? There's the income angle and the accumulation angle. And also, guys, let's not forget, tax deferral is powerful. And this is an incredible tax planning tool. Is it as good as life insurance? No. But there's a trick though, right? If you really want the power of life insurance, you got to buy it when you're 45. What's the average age of an annuity buyer in America? It's not 45. 45-year-olds aren't thinking about annuities. 62-year-olds are. And they want what they wish they would have bought in life insurance in 45, but they can have it in annuities. And so that I think is part of the story too, that we just don't do a great job of telling our story. We got a great product.
So do we agree that innovation is about framing it properly, using it to solve the problems that we are aware are on the horizon, help people bridge the gap, and try to do it not exclusively in one or the other environment, not retail or in plan, but do it both. Thank you so much,
Yep.
and it was a pleasure being your host here today.
Thanks.
Thank you.